Welcome back to Contrary to Popular Wrestling. I'm Carmine the Spirito along with James Southard. Oh boy, James. Today, we've got something else for the listeners. We're talking about a conversation unlike none other.
You know, they say the path to hell is lined with good intentions. We really set out to deliver part 2 of the Untold Stories of the AWA. We were going to have some great guests lined up, and the first of which was your good friend Frankie DeFalco.
Frankie the Thumper DeFalco.
Frankie the Thumper.
Oh, and by the way, I'll bet you don't know where he got the name the Thumper from. That was Terry Funk's name in Paradise Alley.
I believe there was a reference to that in our episode with Bob Johnson when he brought up Paradise Alley. Be sure and check that out in the YouTube archives. But needless to say, we called up Frankie, we had a conversation, and 2 hours later, we realized that this had to be the episode we brought to you this week. The AWA stories, there's some AWA stories in here. It's Frankie DeFalco with the undertones of the AWA, but Frankie's just such a character. We had such a blast recording with him. We had to bring this to you this week, and we'll be back hopefully next week with the Untold Stories of the AWA. But without further ado, and we gotta warn you folks before we start, if you don't like explicit language, you're not a fan of the vulgarities and the obscene, this isn't the show for you. If you can't tell by the episode title, Frankie DeFalco, he just doesn't give a fuck. And that's the overall tone of this whole interview. So, Carmine, without further ado, I say we kick it over to your good friend, Frankie the Thumper DeFalco.
Our first guest here on Contrary to Popular Wrestling, a dear old friend of mine of over 30 years from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee's favorite son, Frankie the Thumper DeFalco. Frankie, welcome to the podcast.
Carmine, how the hell are you? I have one question for you.
Uh-oh.
What the fuck do you want?
That's exactly what you said the first time I called you.
That's right. That was after you went back home for a little bit, straighten out your stuff. But, yeah, that's what happened when you called me.
Yeah, that was 1993, probably. I'm going to try to act like I don't know you and ask you some questions here for our listeners.
That's good. I'll save you anyways. It don't matter.
Let's start from the beginning. When did you start training?
I started training in 1979. I was a senior in high school. What started out is, as everyone is, you're always a fan of professional wrestling. I was a fan, being in Milwaukee, of the original Vern Gagne's AWA, not that bullshit that fucking Dale Gagne impersonated the shit out of. And Dale Gagne is not his real name. It's Gagner, but he tried feeding off the Gagne name. I can go on for days burying that fucking moron, but anyways, we won't do that.
This is probably the bluest show that we've had so far. This is great, Frank. I knew you would bring something special to the podcast.
And then some. Yeah, I started in 1979, and at that time, I was a senior in high school, and I was also the gym instructor at the Milwaukee Boys Club. Carmine, you remember that one? 24th and Rogers.
Yeah.
I would always just miss a person by the name of David Starr, and the kids would always come up to me, Frankie, there's a guy who's putting wrestling holds on us, and he's doing things to us. I'm like, okay. So I finally got there early enough, and sure enough, he had a hold on a kid, and I came up behind him and put the chicken wing on him. And I uttered some not-so-nice words in his ears and had him banned from the boys' club. But until then, he mentioned, hey, how would you like to become a professional wrestler? I can't believe I'm putting his ass over. But I was introduced to Al King Kong Patterson, who is and was still a very, very nice gentleman. Al King Kong Patterson trained in Memphis, brought his profession up here, married Grace Brazil, who was a cousin of Bobo Brazil.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And,
I didn't know Grace was a cousin of Bobo's.
Grace was the first cousin of Bobo. Yep.
Oh, I had no idea. So you broke in with Al Patterson. He promoted at the Eagles Club in Milwaukee, right?
He didn't start there, though, Carm. He didn't start there.
Where did he start?
He started at the Crystal Palace on 19th and National. That's where I had my first match, May 24th, 1979, against a drunk by the name of Ed Wildcat Hibble. What? Yeah.
He was a drunk,
Like I said, man, I could tell you stories we don't have all time. But the weird thing is how I met Tom Stone, who falls into this storyline, is Al never liked Stone because he felt that Stone ratted him out to Vern Gagne. He was like a snitch. So I was there at the time, like I said, didn't know Stone. So Al and I escorted him out of the building, and Al literally threw him down a flight of stairs. And these are marble steps. I'm visioning it right now in my head. And Al threw him down. I said, what was that for? And he told me that he thought that he was a rat, or a snitch to Vern Gagne and telling Vern all of his things that he was doing here in the business. So, yeah, that's how I met Stone. So going on from there, I wrestled for Al for like 2 years. At the time, Al did not have, the ice cream, the whole deal, but he did run a show at the Milwaukee Auditorium, and he had Bob Orton Jr., Ronnie Garvin, Randy Savage on that show, and I teamed with Jeff May in a tag match against the Slaughterhouse Brothers, and there's a couple thousand people there. I had a lot of family and friends there. We went over, of course, because I was teamed with Jeff, and that was Al's number one guy. After that, I started working security at the same time with Midwest Security. We did the Brewer games at Old Milwaukee County Stadium and Summerfest, and that's where I ended up meeting Chris Curtis, who we were doing security together, and goes, hey, why don't you come to Federation Hall, 13th and Lincoln, and train with Tom Stone? And I'm like, oh, shit, do I need this aggravation? But Stone and I had a talk beforehand, what's in the past and past. Stone would refine me and everything else. I had my first match against Stone, and I went to cover him, and that fucking moron bit me right on the inner thigh during the 3 count. And that was the finish of the match. I couldn't kick out. I'm on top there, and I couldn't get up because that was the finish. He left a nice teeth marks on my inner thigh. And it was funny at the time, but going into that then, Stone was the middleman to get bookings for the AWA. And that's how I started doing the AWA. It was 83 or 84, 82, 83, whatever it was. We started doing TV, flying to Las Vegas every other weekend to do our TV shows at the Showboat. That's how I got into the AWA.
What was the first group of guys that Stone took to Vegas for Vern?
Myself, Mike Moran, Bull Payne, Trevor Adonis, Pete Sanchez, Billy Bold Eagle, the Indian Kid here, Jake the Milkman Milliman, Chris Curtis, Woody Wilson. Ugh, what a story that could be. Yeah, we had a great bunch. Vern and Greg loved us. That's why he flew us all the time. There were a couple guys from California like Billy Anderson and a couple other guys that were used out there. I forgot Jesse Hernandez was always a referee for Vern out there, but Vern always flew us out there because he liked the way we worked with everybody.
Who was the first match you had on TV for Vern?
That would be some kid by the name of Shawn Michaels.
Really? I wonder what ever happened to him.
I heard I retired him now. He's no longer in the business. I have no idea what he's doing these days.
He probably lost his smile.
I haven't heard his name since. Haven't heard his name since. You could see that match on YouTube. A lot of my stuff is on YouTube these days between AWA and the old WWF.
So the topic here this week in our second part of our 3-part series is the Untold Stories of the AWA. You guys had a lot of fun out there in Vegas, raising a lot of hell. Got any stories?
Yeah.
Lay some on us.
Tom Stone would, like I said, always book the talent. And he would book a couple guys from Chicago as well, Sonny Rogers, and there was always a kid by the name of Tolos the Greek. Stone, being Stone, kept ribbing Greg about who was, coming. So Stone kept telling Greg different names for Tolos. So every show, we did 4 hours. So on every show was a different Tolos. Stone cut a lot of heat for that one as well. All of a sudden, the first time Tolos went out as Tolos the Greek. And then the second taping, Tolos was supposed to come out, and he didn't come out because of a different name named Tolos. Third taping come around, and Tolos was supposed to be on there again, but Tolos didn't know because he was under the name of another Greek Tolos. So needless to say, I think he was supposed to work Nick Bockwinkel at the time, and then there was a time against Curt Hennig, and there was no opponents for them at the time because Tolos didn't know Stone did that to him and ribbed him, and Greg didn't know any better. Tolos, like I said, was booked for 4 different segments for 4 different shows on AWA TV. Never showed up for the last 3 tapings, which was hilarious.
Stone was notorious for his ribs. You guys would go on road trips, and if you guys weren't in the car, when he was ready, he'd just take off and just leave you.
Stone loves his buffets, so we would always ride with him. And if you were not the first one or one of the guys following Stone when he was done, he was in his van and he was gone totally. We, needless to say, had to keep up with him, chowing down. He did leave us one time. We were doing TV in Missouri. He did. Him and Jake waffled down all their food real quick. We were at a barbecue place. Stone and Jake took off with us, so we had to ride with other people, jamming in the cars. It was sick.
He just left you right there, standing there in the parking lot.
Us. Yep. There was another time, too, when we learned at that time. We were doing TV up in Rochester, Minnesota for AWA. Everyone loved Jake the Milkman Milliman for what he used to do. So me, Jake, and I forgot who it was. Might have been Moran. Went into the bathroom, and Jake being Jake takes a freaking bump right on the bathroom floor and gets up and takes a piss. Like, Jake, what was that for? He goes, I was getting ready for that stiff AWA ring we were going to be going into. I'm like, wow. Yeah.
The rings were a little stiff back then, huh?
Oh, my God. They were so stiff. Between that ring and the Kansas City ring, it was almost like bumping on concrete. And that's probably why Jake took the bumps on those cement floors. It was ridiculous.
Back to Vegas.
Yeah.
You hung out with everybody. I mean, pretty much anybody that went out after the show. You guys partied it up in Vegas. Some memories?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we were all on the pool because we got there early. So we went to the pool, which was outside, and all of a sudden we see Marty Jannetty, Sean, Colonel De Beers, Snuka, Larry Zabisco coming out of a room. And then the last one out of the room was Sherry Martel. We all look at each other. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then we figured out what the hell was going on. So needless to say, there was some nose candy going on out of Sherry's room, God rest her soul. But yeah, that's what the deal was going out of that room.
Whatever it takes to get you through the night, Frank, right?
That's very, very true. Very, very true. Getting to know all those guys because I was doing security for them and being a fan of the AWA, watching the Crusher, Mad Dog, Dusty, Dick Murdoch, Baron, all those guys, and becoming a security guard for the AWA when they would come to Milwaukee, and then getting to know these guys, then getting into the business, talking to them then, and then getting my own company, along with you with Mid-American, and getting to know like Mad Dog, Nick Bockwinkel, and all those guys, Baron. It was just like a dream come true. When you're a young kid, everybody has a dream, becoming a doctor, a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. I always wanted to become a professional wrestler, and I lived my dream, getting to know all these legends, and then having some of them come in for my company with Bruce City Wrestling and everything. Fuck being a doctor and a lawyer. I love what I do, love what I've been doing for 40 plus years, and the AWA will always be an asset in my back of my head and in my heart, being in this territory here. It was always a blessing getting to know all these guys. In fact, I talk to Greg Gagne 2 times a month about how things are, and he asks how Jake Milliman and I were the only ones from this territory to go to Vern's funeral, and seeing Bob Backlund, I'm sure you heard what he did at Vern's funeral, was oh my God,
that was wild.
It was ridiculous, and we're all looking like, what the hell is that guy doing? But
he was
yeah,
a little out of control, just being Backlund, I guess. It was really strange and bizarre, wasn't it?
It was, and it was kind of embarrassing because we didn't know what the hell was going on. He thought it was a freaking shoot, and he wanted to make an angle out of it. How can you make an angle out of somebody who passed away? Yeah, it was weird.
Who's he trying to shoot the angle with? That's the question.
Good question. I think it was probably Greg. Like I said, it was Looney Tune-ish at that point.
One of my favorite Frankie the Thumper DeFalco stories involves you and Playboy Buddy Rose. Tell that story, Frank. One of my favorites.
So we're doing TV at a college in Waupun, not the jail, the prison, but it was in Waupun. And back at the time, I was wearing a purple Playboy Bunny shirt, and I'm in gear ready to go. And that was Buddy Rose's first time back. And he goes, hey, kid, you can't wear that shirt out there. I'm like, why not? He goes, well, I'm Playboy Buddy Rose. I go, I don't give a fuck. I'm Frankie the Thumper DeFalco. The Thumper is a rabbit. He goes, well, that's a Playboy Bunny. I said, no, for me, in my eyes, it's a rabbit. So he went and narked me out to Greg Gagne. Like I said, Greg and I had a good rapport, and he said I could go out to TV and do it. So needless to say, that set off Buddy Rose. So now we're in Las Vegas, ready to do TV a month or 2 later, and Buddy goes, hey, Frankie, can you do one-arm push-ups? I said, no, I got a bad elbow. I can't do it. He goes, okay, well, we'll do something else. So we're ready to start the match, and Buddy goes, rear zip. I'm like, what? So he goes down and starts doing one-handed push-ups. He only could get his fat ass to do 3. street. And I called him a motherfucker right there in the ring. So I went down, and I think I did like 5 or 7 one-arm push-ups. And I got up. He goes, "You ribbed me." I said, "I told you I couldn't do them, but you forced me to do it." So we ended up having our match, blah, blah, blah. We shot a little bit in the beginning because of what he did, and it pissed me off. But, yeah, that's my Buddy Rose story. But I'm sure you want to elaborate a little bit more at the CAC, don't you, Carmine?
Oh, I sure do. Thank you, Frankie. Thank you.
Well, go ahead. You can start it.
Well, Buddy was still pissed off years later after this thing
because
went down.
I embarrassed his fat 400-pound body on national TV. Go ahead. Now you can continue.
As we were at the Cauliflower, Frankie and I'm not sure of the year, but I spot Buddy Rose in the distance. As Frankie and I are walking over there, I said, "Frankie, he's probably going to think that you're Steve Lombardi. He's going to call you Steve Lombardi. I got a feeling." And sure enough, right, Frank? When you walked up to him, he said, "Who are you, Steve Lombardi?"
Yeah. Yep. And
he held that grudge against you just for doing those one-arm push-ups.
Remember that time I embarrassed you on TV with those one-arm push-ups? And he got all shitty, pissed off, and he walked away. Fuck him. Rest in peace. Fuck him.
Let's mark this down. Frankie is not a Buddy Rose fan.
No, I wasn't. Paul Princhman, whole nother story.
In regards to the locker room of the AWA, did you get along with everybody? Who were some of the guys that you got along the best with?
Curt Hennig, because I borrowed him several pairs of my knee pads, which I never got back. Thank you, Curt. Love you. Rest in heaven. Who else? Greg, Jim, Steve Olsenowski, Road Warriors. The cool thing about this, too, is getting along, Nick and I really never talked wrestling. Even when you brought him in at that show at that Mike Higgins, we always talked insurance because he was insurance and I was in insurance at the time too. So it was very rare that we talked about wrestling. It would be, "Frankie, my boy, what's new in the insurance industry?" And that's all we talked about. We didn't talk about wrestling. We talked about insurance and about annuities and stuff like that. And it was such an educational conversation with him all the time. I love Nick. Talk about Mad Dog Vachon. Not much to talk about wrestling with him. It was always about cribbage. Oh my God, did he love cribbage. And Schmitty and him always got along. I don't know if you're going to have Schmitty on here at all with this, but those two they were best friends. Remember that time, Carmine, we had that wrestling convention at the Hyatt downtown, and you brought in Mad Dog?
Yes,
that was a great time with him as well.
Remember with Nick, I had Nick in, I want to say it was like 1995 or something like that. And he was at Wilson Park. You were able to hook him up to do a radio show following the Brewer game to promote the show at Wilson Park. And they were promoting the interview during the Brewer game. The announcers were saying that following the Brewer game, we're going to be having former AWA World Champion Nick Bockwinkel on. And it was just supposed to be a short interview. But Nick talked for an hour and a half. They kept him on for an hour and a half. People were coming in an hour after the gates opened.
Yep.
Oh, he was just great.
They were supposed to be talking post-game Brewers, and it ended up becoming the Nick Bockwinkel show instead.
I believe he was interviewed by Steve the Homer True, very famous radio personality from Milwaukee.
Correct. Yeah.
Back to Vegas and the Showboat, Frank. Your memories of doing television there at the Showboat.
2 separate locker rooms. What we did is we used to meet up in Vern and Greg's suite, everybody. Then the heels would go to one locker room, faces to another. So we'd have to go over our matches in the suites or whoever else had a room, in the hallway even. And this was like 3 hours before a show, 4 hours before the show. But then, like if I was a face the first hour and then I was a face the third hour, I would have to go behind the bleachers and go to the heel locker room. They were very big locker rooms, but that was the best thing you could do is to talk about your matches 4 hours before each taping. It was nice locker rooms, a lot of harmony. We would get paid there, but then we would spend it down in the casino right away. So, and then we would fly in on Friday, like morning, afternoon, and then we'd fly out like after the show, like 2 a.m. on the red ice.
Oh, okay.
So, but we had fun. One time, AWA at the Showboat, Kevin Kelly just got done training, the whole deal. He became the convict for WWF, but he was working Woody Wilson, and Kevin was stiff, and he kicked Woody really hard in the head, ended up getting concussion. So we're on the flight home, and Woody's like ahead of us, and we all noticed his head was starting to get bigger because of the altitude that we were in the plane and compression of the airplane.
Wow.
His head started swelling because he started getting water on his brain.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some dangerous stuff right there.
And then some. Literally, I think his head could have exploded if we had such a longer flight. So if we were going across country for that 6-hour flight or 8-hour flight, whatever it would have been, but being in the Midwest, it was only like a 4-hour flight. So the minute we landed, they took Woody to the emergency room because of that. The big rib we always used to do on the flight, on the stewardesses or whatever, waitresses, whatever we used to call them, now to call flight attendants, was Bull Payne would always, they had the puke bags. He would make pretend that he was throwing up. He would press the button above to have the waitress come over, and then he would, with his gum and everything, we'd put it like under his nostril, make it pretend like his nose was running. It was like a booger, Right when she would come, he would sneeze and make pretend that shit came out of his nose. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, do you have a tissue? And then he would have like the long ass gum just hanging there, and we would just fucking laugh, and they would have got so frustrated, totally hilarious. With us,
whole lot of ribbing. The AWA guys were really into ribbing.
I got Trevor one time too, unfortunately, when he was going with us. I put a piece of my tape right on his ass. So when he went out for TV, the camera caught the white tape hanging by his ass. Yeah, and I got Mike Richards a couple times too with shaving cream on his ass too. But Tom Stone taught me well. I was a big ribber, and I still am these days. But the fact is, Carmine, and you cannot rib a ribber. I catch my shit later. My students try to do it with me now, but they cannot. I'm way ahead of them. So I get them fucks all the time. I have a great bunch of students right now at the Thumper's Den Wrestling Academy. I would say that I have about 15 or 17 students right now. I have 3 more starting right now as well. But my school, I know we're talking AWA, but we're talking ribbing right now. At my school, there is no basement. So the new kids, I have them go look for the air supply to bring up so we can take out the winter air out of the springs, which I don't have springs in my school ring. So what I do is I have them bring in the spring air and the summer air, and they have to shake all the metal, the beams underneath the ring, to put the summer air in the ring. And they do that. In the meantime, what they do is when they're crawling under the ring, they're also cleaning under my ring, too, getting all the dust and everything out of there. Yeah, there were a couple times in the AWA, too, we would do there would be a show here in Milwaukee when Vern did a couple AWA shows at the end with Jerry Lawler had the strap, and who the hell didn't show up? Oh, I worked Sergeant Slaughter, and I think it was Lawler who no-showed. And I think Don Morocco, who I worked in the WWE and AWA many times, I think he ended up taking the strap that night from Slaughter or whatever it was. But we went to a bar called the Sly Fox that I used to bounce at and everything else. So myself, the Nasty Boys, Curt Hennig, Shawn Michaels, Marty, Jimmy Snuka, Scott Hall. Now, that's a notorious group right there, okay? So we went in, and I introduced them all to Cindy, who was the owner of the Sly Fox, and Jimmy goes up to goes, "Sister, how are you?" and sticks his tongue right down her throat. And wow. I'm like, oh, my God, here it goes. So all of a sudden that starts. Oh, we had with us, too, Leon White. He takes some girl who was at the show into the bathroom, locks the door, and starts banging her on the sink. And I'm like, this is not going to be good. Later that night, Scott Hall, I think it was with the Indian kid, Billy Bold Eagle, they were putting the gimmicks into his drink. And I said, guys, that's not cool, trying to stick up for him. So Mike and I, they liked us, but they gimmicked his beer. And Scott and Kurt were going to shave his eyebrows. Needless to say, we stopped it from happening.
Wait. You actually stopped an eyebrow shaving from going down, Frank? That must have been the only time I've ever heard of you actually stopping that.
I did. Because I don't know if it was out of respect that they respected me and Mike or whatever it was, but
right.
They didn't do it. They didn't do it. And Chad was out. He was literally out. Not like the Nasty Boys did to Freddie Blassie on that flight, but they didn't do it to Chad. We had a lot of fun back in the AWA with all those guys. When the AWA, we used to go to Rochester, Minnesota, towards the end, and Vern coming up to me goes, "You owe me one job." I'm like, okay. what do you want me to do? And I ended up working some big Japanese kid that they brought in. I forgot who it was. It wasn't Yoko. It wasn't Yokozuna. Thank God. It wasn't Rodney. It was somebody else. And I put the guy over, and it wasn't that bad. I don't know. I don't understand why Vern would say, hey, you owe me one job. All he's got to do is say, hey, Frankie, you're going to work this guy here, blah, 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 and put him over. But that was Vern. And another thing, too, if you did not shake Vern's hand in a strength way, not like it was back in the old day where you'd shake your hand, to let them know, hey, you're a worker. I'm talking about Carmine.
Yeah, so in other words, the worker's handshake. You gave a worker's handshake with your thumb and your index finger, kind of like
Correct.
a light little handshake to show that you're light in the ring and that you know how to work. Yep. Right.
And the first time I did that with Vern, he goes, shake my hand like a man. I'm like, okay. Vern almost broke my fucking hand. It was so stiff. Could you imagine Vern and Lou Thez shaking hands? Oh, my God. It was like they'd kill each other. It was crazy.
I didn't know he was against the worker handshake. I didn't know that. So.
Hey, there's another time, too. Stone brought Woody Wilson in to do TV up in Minneapolis one time when they used to do TV at the TV studio. Tom Stone goes, Vern, this is Woody Wilson. He's the worker that I brought up. And I'm sitting off to the side, and Vern goes, you don't have the body of a wrestler. This is a body of a wrestler. And he brings out Paul Ellering. That's when Paul was jacked. Right. And he made Woody feel like shit. That's why Vern was, didn't want to make you feel like shit, but he wanted to make it look like a wrestler. Back then, I was like 255, 265. I looked like one, But
absolutely.
Vern being Vern, I'll tell you, you got to appreciate what he was. Here's another story about Vern. Dennis Hildegard, who used to promote Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa for Vern. He told me a story, and I think I told you this one too, Carm. Dennis went to Vern about doing a Milwaukee County Stadium show, which easily could have drew 60,000 people there. And it would have been Vern for the AWA title against the Crusher. Dennis said, hey, this could be big money. Switch the strap to Crusher there in his hometown. A month or two later, drop it back in Minneapolis. Vern did not want to do it. You believe that? That would have made such big money.
It would have sold out. It would have sold out County Stadium.
It would have been 60,000 people there. Easily 60. That would have been huge money for the AWA back in those days. But Vern, being Vern, did not want to drop the strap to the Crusher in the Crusher's backyard. Even if it meant dropping the strap a month or two in Minneapolis at the St. Paul Civic Center. Did not want to do it.
So Vern had quite the ego then.
Big time, yes. Greg wanted to put the strap on himself, but Greg was maybe 220, 225. But at the time now, you got the booking committee. It was Nick Zbyszko and Wahoo and Ray Stevens, and they all shot it down. They didn't think Greg had the body of being a heavyweight champion. So those four guys shot it down.
What kind of a boss was Vern?
Vern was strict. He had his moments. There was a little bit of play, but not a lot of play. Not like it is these days, where Vince has a little bit of play, where Vince is a lot of serious, but Vern was more business than play. Absolutely.
What's one thing that he would not tolerate?
Vern wouldn't tolerate a lot of shenanigans going on in the back. He wanted anything before the show had to be strictly business. After the show or after you're done working, you can do what you want. But it was strictly business with Vern. It was like 80-20 business, 90-10 business with Vern.
Right. Yeah. So if you happen you guys are in Vegas, and if you happen to be hungover from the night before, would you hear it from Vern? Would you hear it from one of the agents?
No, not really.
Just as long as you were able to perform. And
yes. If you had an injury, they took care of it for you. One time I was working AWA, the worst night ever in Indianapolis, or India, where the hell did Bruiser used to run his shows? Hammond Civic Center. That's where we were. Worst night ever. First taping, I've got Stan Hansen.
Oh, my God.
Second taping, I've got Bruiser Brody and John Nord. It's like death become me. And I'm scared as shit. First match went over good. Thank God I was close enough for Stan to throw a lariat at me. That wasn't that bad. Second or third taping, I had Brody and Nord. And talking to Brody, going over the match, we're talking, professional, the whole deal. And all of a sudden, Brody goes into Brody mode, where I start getting crossed and everything, and I'm like, oh, shit, I'm going to fucking die. And my partner is Bassett, this kid from Green Bay, Chris Bassett. And Chris had a big ego. I'll get into that story with him next, if I'm okay with that. So we're going out to the ring, and I'm like, hey, you realize we're going to get the shit kicked out of us? He goes, yeah, I know. So all of a sudden, here come Brody and Nord, and they're carrying garbage cans and this and that. I'm like, oh, shit. So all of a sudden, we're hearing, huss, and we're shitting our pants. So all of a sudden, Brody comes in, and I thought he was going to be stiff with me, but he wasn't. And I'm getting the stuff, and he's holding me. He goes, chop him, telling Nord to chop me. I'm like, no. So all of a sudden, Nord comes in, big boot. I went down. Brody picks me up again. Chop him. I'm like, oh, shit, here it comes, because they both chopped very, very stiff. And Nord comes in with a big boot again. I went down. Brody goes out after Bassett. He's going at it on the outside and beating the shit out of him in the bleachers. Nord picks me up and gives me a side suplex. And I kind of landed on my shoulder, but I sold it. I'm like, this could be good. So I rolled out. Greg Gunny's doing TV, and I'm opposite of the ring of Greg. And he goes, signaling for me to get in the ring. And I'm signaling my shoulder. Dislocated. So, but it wasn't dislocated. So they went out. Brody and Nord are beating the shit out of Bassett in the bleachers and everywhere else. And I got out of that match with a gimmick separated shoulder, but it wasn't. After the match, Nord goes, brother, are you okay? I go, yeah. I popped it back in but I'm stiff. Nord gives me 2 Tylenol 3s for the road home. Brody come up to me, hey, brother, you okay? And everything. And all of a sudden, I look at her, see Bassett just limping, getting the shit kicked out of him. But that's him, not me. Now, on to the next Bassett story. TV up in Green Bay. Bassett comes in all dressed up, and you're not supposed to have any guests with you. Bassett, being in Green Bay, from Green Bay, brings his wife with him to catering. So we're all like, oh, kiss ass, blah, blah, blah. So in the back, I found out I'm working Haku and Andre. I'm talking Haku, things are going well, back and forth, blah, blah, blah. Andre's drinking his bottles of wine. And all of a sudden, Bassett comes in, takes a chair, sits in front of us. He goes, hey, guys, this is what I'd like to do. And I'm like, huh? And Haku and I look at each other, and I slid my chair off to the left a little bit. And, yeah, you can guess where this is going to go. And he's sitting back, doing his suggestions and everything, and all of a sudden, I think Chief Jay Strongbow was the agent for our match. He goes, hey, boss, who do you want to take it on? He goes, him. And he pointed at Bassett.
Oh, my God.
And so I started the match with Haku. We did our thing. Tags and Andre. Andre did his thing with me. Andre mares me in the corner by Bassett. I take Bassett. And I just stayed in the corner, selling on the outside, and they beat the shit out of Bassett. Andre slams him. As Bassett's on all fours getting up, Andre elbows him, laying all his weight on top of Bassett.
Oh, my God.
Just killed him. And then Haku used to have, like, these big toenails, He gave him the big super kick and gashed him under his eye with his toenail.
With his toenails?
With his toenails. Yeah, just killed him.
Your trainer, King Kong Patterson, used to have toenails like Jordan almonds, too. He could slice you open with those toenails.
Yeah, we won't mention Mike Richards either when he came back from Kansas City with his, 6-inch nails. But, yeah, I don't know if Mike's going to hear this, but hey, Mike, how you doing?
Might.
There's a good chance.
I think that tag team match is on YouTube, isn't it? The Andre Haku match with you guys?
There's a good chance it is, yes.
That's a must to check out.
Moral of the story is, when you're enhancement talent, you sit down, shut your fucking mouth, and hear what they have to say. Your job is to put them over. Hercules Hernandez used to compliment us, too. Ted DiBiase, if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be here. I'm like, hey, thank you. Herc and I, when Herc was living in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, we used to talk all the time. We used to meet all the time. Breakfast, lunch, everything else. Ted DiBiase had a female friend up here in Milwaukee. When he was here visiting, we always used to talk. We used to meet. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever it was. Because we knew our jobs. Literally, our jobs. Not like the kids these days where they want to get all their shit in. You know, you got a 10-minute match. I'm talking indie, where you have a 10-minute match, but they want to put 15 minutes worth of shit into a match. It don't work that fucking way. Do as you're fucking told. But that's what we had to do back in the AWA, WWF, WWE. You had to sit there, and they would ask you, hey, what can you do? Blah, blah, blah. Great, let's get that in. When I had, you see my match with Ted DiBiase on YouTube. Ted asked me what I could do. But then again, Ted liked me, so he let me do some stuff, along with your buddy Virgil. Remember my match with him, Virgil, where that fucking moron Scott DeMarc fucked up that match? But that's your boy, Scotty.
Our old friend, referee Scott DeMarc.
I wonder if he got his barbecue grill yet. Do you think he got his barbecue fixed yet?
Maybe next year, Frank. Maybe next year.
A week from Tuesday.
Poor Scotty will never live down that finish as long as he lives, when he counted both of you guys out of the ring after just a couple minutes. Back to the AWA, Frank.
Okay, let's go there.
Let's go back to the AWA. You and Sabisco got along well.
Larry and I got along very well. Very well. I brought him in a couple times for my company in the early days. We would talk because AWA used to be on ESPN Classic. We would literally call each other and talk about, hey, Frankie, remember this? He used to call me Abbott from Abbott and Costello. Hey, Abbott, remember this? And they're like, yeah, I remember this. You know, but Larry and I got along well, too. He has his little deal in Florida right now. He was married to one of Vern's daughters. But yeah, like I said, I got along very, very well and professional with all those guys.
Word was you were to be Larry Sabisco's bodyguard for TV. Isn't that true?
I was.
Is that right?
I was. Yes. And that was supposed to be at the time when the tag team the tag team stuff came on.
Right.
But at that time, before the AWA, when Jesse Ventura was in there, he had the thing going with Jake the Milkman Milliman, give Jake a break storyline. And he would do the thing against the Fabs, the fabulous ones, Steve Kern and Stan Lane. Vern loved Jake. Loved him. Everybody loves Jake. There should be a story with everybody loves Jake. That's how that story went down. The thing with me being the bodyguard, it eventually didn't go down. You know, there was another thing, too. I know it's an AWA story, but with Steve Lombardi, when we were doing WWF, because we looked a lot like each other, Slick, who was managing Steve at the time, put a baseball hat on top of me and said, hey, why don't we call you the Louisville Slugger? And then you got Steve doing his baseball gimmick. Or no, I forgot what he was going to call me, but then we were going to be called the Louisville Sluggers. Slick went to Pat Patterson with it, and Pat shot it down, unfortunately. That would have been one of my breaks with that one, too. But, yeah, I was going to be the bodyguard for Larry. Yeah.
Wow. And of course, Frank, we can't forget the time, I think it was like 95, when you went to the airport to pick up Abdullah the Butcher for one of our shows in Milwaukee. You said you really didn't know him that well, but boy, he acted like he knew you, right? And you guys started talking a bit.
We were at breakfast. Let me go to the breakfast, because that's where we went. We went to Denny's by the airport, and Abby ordered like 2 or 3 whole chickens, 2 loaves of bread, like a dozen eggs, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle of breakfast, he goes, hey, Steve, remember that time in Montreal? I'm like, oh, shit, here we go. I'm like, Abby, do you think I'm Steve Lombardi? And in the middle of his eating, he looks at me, he goes, aren't you Steve Lombardi? And I go, no, Abby, I'm Frankie DeFalco. I'm picking you up for the show tonight. He goes, oh, brother, I'm so sorry. I thought you were Steve Lombardi.
I love that one,
so
Frank.
much of that shit. I got so much of that shit, but yeah, I brought Abby in one time for one of my anniversary shows. He was working, I forgot who it was.
He worked Dinty, didn't he? He worked Matt Winchester, your City Bruiser.
Yeah. I'm dressed in a suit, and Abby wanted to gig me because I was dressed in a suit. And every time he came after me, I ran. But he ended up getting JP. JP got color for him. Matt got color for him. Somebody else got color for him, but not me. hell to the no.
Yeah,
Wasn't going to happen.
The couple times that I managed Abby, I just stayed as far away as possible when he was on the outside of the ring. After that bell rang, just stay away from Abby, and especially if he's out in the crowd, do not go into the crowd and follow them because he will take a shot at you. Just try to stay away as much as possible. I used to stand on a chair and watch whoever he was wrestling go through the crowd. Back to Las Vegas. Back to the Showboat, Frank. How many trips did you make out there to do TV, would you say?
Every other weekend, I would say, because we did 4 hours of tapings. So every other weekend, I would say, my God, maybe 20 times.
Wow.
Yeah. My first time out there, we flew, and that was my first time ever flying also. And we went over to Grand Canyon, and we hit an air pocket, and we dropped about 100 feet. And I was scared. And everyone, the boys are laughing at me, but hey, I didn't know what the hell to expect. They're all laughing, and Pete Sanchez took a picture of me saying a prayer. My hands were folded, and I was literally saying a prayer at the time. Please, God,
were you holding a rosary?
No.
No rosary.
No, as much Catholic as I am. No, but I was saying my prayer. Hell yes, I was.
So the Vegas times, you stayed there. What, 1 night, 2 nights for each taping?
2 nights. Flew in on Friday. Saturday we got there. When we get there, we could do whatever we want. Call time was at Vern and Greg's suite, I think at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we could do what we want, but we had to report to the locker rooms at the Showboat by like an hour and a half or 2 hours before.
Did Vern ban some moves or some holds in the AWA? Were there some things he didn't want the guys to do?
Yeah, the sleeper hold, because it was his. Couldn't do the sleeper. Couldn't do anything like that because it was Vernon Gregg's. And then Nick had his, of course, but the enhancement guys could not do the sleeper hold. For myself, like say, as a reversal, if I'm working Greg, if I threw him in and I went for the sleeper, I couldn't have it on him where he could reverse it. They didn't like that too much. We couldn't do the figure 4 because it was Nick's.
Of course.
So, I mean, there were a couple times, too, where we had the red eye, and we had like a 2 o'clock flight, and we had to be at the airport like by 1 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock. We had girls in our rooms finishing them up, and we literally had to grab a cab and get to the hotel. I mean, it was ridiculous. So many stories just associating with those guys that you would look up to when you were, when I was younger with them, and then drinking with them. Bachwinkle with his cocktails, and Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, and having beers with these guys. I just wish the territories would come back. But, I mean, everybody knows the story of when Vince McMahon had the big meeting of all the guys, the owners of the territories, and he gave Vern a blank check. Vern said, "Fuck you, kid," and ripped up that blank check. It was amazing, but
he should have took the offer. Vern could have had that. It was a blank check. He could have wrote whatever he wanted on there, and it would have been perfect. But Vern had his pride, and, Vern did whatever he could to keep the AWA going, did shows with the NWA. Then he had USA Wrestling. With, Pro Wrestling USA, right?
Pro Wrestling, right? With doing TV out in Atlantic City. I don't know, Carm, if you were there for any of those.
I was there, yes, but, I was.
Those were good times as well. Then Vern tried going countrywide. He did shows at the Cow Palace. That's where Zbyszko did the thing with Curt Hennig with the coins in hand and turned on Nick. God bless him. Vern did his best to keep AWA alive and his territory afloat, but eventually pride got the best of him and everything else, and it just never worked out at the end.
Well, I guess you could say pride, but then you could also say ego, being that Vern did have quite the ego. Was there a difference between the AWA locker rooms and the WWF locker rooms, Frank?
Oh, my God, yes. When I was doing WWF, I mean, seeing all that stuff, the steroids back in those days, seeing them guys just shoot themselves up in the ass and in the arm and everything else, it was weird. seeing the syringes laying around in those bathrooms and in the garbage can and everywhere else. It was totally different. The main talent had their locker rooms, and the enhancement guys had to dress in the hallway. It was unfortunate where, compared to the AWA, we all could dress in the same locker rooms.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was at one time in the AWA doing TV, and Mike Richards was working the Freebirds, and Mike ended up taking a really bad backdrop it was a double backdrop, I think, from Michael Hayes and one of the other guys. It was a good one by Mike, but he ended up falling right on his ass. And I think Mike ended up jamming his spine and crapping his pants because it was that bad on the Freebirds' part. You know, that's one, too, where Vern brought in the Freebirds and everything he could, names, towards the end to save the company. Ric Flair came in. They had the big shows at, I think it was Comiskey Park. He had a couple shows there, teaming up with Bruiser's Company and NWA. I think that's where Lawler had the AWA strap, teaming with WCCW with the Von Erichs and everything, too. Like I said, Vern did his best with pride and ego to keep what he could, but towards the end, it just couldn't do anything from that point as well. It's a shame. You know,
right.
I still have my AWA shirts and everything else, too, that I have in saran wrap. They're not going to collect any dust anymore. That's where they are, where they're going to stay. You know, there's a lot of guys who wish the territories were still back, but we're in a whole different day and age right now where nothing you can do. The COVID, you know, shut down guys like NWA Power. Dave Marquez's Hollywood out in California is closed down because of it too. But in my eyes, AWA was the best territory.
We would be amiss if we didn't bring up the ring rats of the AWA. And I guess somebody that comes to mind right away is Marty Jannetty. You and Jannetty used to party it up a little bit, a few nights out on the town, I understand.
First time Marty was in, I got him a rat. We're at the old Milwaukee Auditorium, and Marty, I think, was on second or third. I brought him. This girl must have came in, knew Marty from the Kansas City days, and I brought her backstage for Marty. I said, "Hey, Marty, I brought this girl here for you." And Marty starts fucking her on the bleachers during the first match. Second match, he's still banging her. Second match is over, and they're playing Marty's music, and he's still banging her. I said, Marty, you're up. And he goes, I'm almost done. And I said, Marty, they just called you. You got to go. So Marty goes on there, pulls his pants up, does his match. She's still sitting there. We're talking. Marty comes back and finishes up with her. Yeah, there were times when Mike and we had our own little fat bunch that we used to call them. And we used to go to their house after the shows or after Mike and I used to call the club, finish the clubs up. And if it was winter time, we threw snowballs at their windows, so they would open up the doors for us. And while Marty was in Kansas City, we used to call him up long distance on their phones, and we used to put like a dozen eggs in their microwave and just watch them all explode. And Mike and I did our things with the girls back then. And one time, Mike and I used to tag team these two. Mike and I had the plan of, in mid-action, tag off and flip them, but they beat us to it. These girls tagged off on us, and they flipped on us, and we were just laughing.
They made the hot tag before you could, huh?
Hot tagged us before we could. Yep, yeah. The Milwaukee Rats were a thing back then. They still are. They come to my shows every once in a while. My guys are, I wouldn't say invested in them, but they have their share right now. So
at least ring rats still exist somewhere, Frankie. Thank God. And of course, when you were speaking about Mike, we're referring to the Texas Hangman, Mike Richards.
Yeah, him and Bull Payne were the original Texas Hangman. They were over big time in the AWA. Don't ask me why. Vern liked them, but he never put the tag straps on them. They should have had the tag straps. They were a big tag team that should have had the straps. They should have had a run, and I think they had a run in WCW under Disorderly Conduct. Him and Tough Tom were Disorderly Conduct. But Bull Payne and Mike Richards were the Hangmen. They knew what they were doing. They were a great
The original Hangmen were outstanding. I mean, what a great heel team. And you're right, Frank. They should have taken the AWA tag straps, without a doubt.
But then
they were a
he ended
great
up putting
team.
them on, what the hell, Construction. They ended up being the Beverly Brothers and the WWF.
Wayne Bloom and Mike Enos.
Horrible. Just fucking horrible talent.
Managed by Johnny V.
Yes. Mike and Frank should have had the tag straps, beaten them, but no, didn't, because they weren't original products through Vern. You know, every time I talk to Greg, he's like, so Frank, you got your students doing 1,000 squats every day? No, Greg, it's not like it was when your dad and you guys ran the camp back then. You know, I have my kids doing 250 squats, but 1,000 squats, it's totally different when Vern used to do his in the barn back then, considering how it is now. Everybody has their own way of training. You know, the East Coast has their mentality of training. The South, you know, down by you, have your, you know, mentality. The West Coast have theirs. The Midwest have theirs. There's all different psychology and theory about training. Back in the day, I've had Steve Carino, Adam Pearce, who are very, you know, they're both in producers in NXT and WWE right now. I think Adam might be the head producer right now. Seeing him on WWE, Raw, and SmackDown all the time. Steve being on NXT. I'm sure they are well up there as head producers. I've had Kevin Sullivan in for my school. Bringing in the old school guys to listen to them, how they used to do it, it's huge. I've always wanted Bully Ray to come in. He says no, but that's a whole other story. I've offered Bully to come in to do a show and a school seminar, and he just doesn't want to, and that's fine. But I would love to bring Bully in for just a seminar. It would be so well educational for these kids these days. I hear he's no longer with Ring of Honor, so he might be freelancing now, so I don't know. But that could be for another time when I have a show. Who knows?
Well, the Midwest has always been, for me, the heart of pro wrestling.
Right.
Psychology was always something that was ingrained in everybody. That was handed down from Vern Gagne to Tom Stone, and now to you and your students. Yep. And your Brew City school is outstanding. You don't cut any corners. You train these guys properly. You instill respect. And that's one thing that I saw the few times that I've come up to visit and to meet all your kids. The most respectful young wrestlers that I've ever met in my life.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's get back to Vern again. You know, when he trained these guys, he had trainees put another on their shoulders and run up and down the stairs. Flights of stairs with a wrestler on their shoulders.
And it was a continuous thing. So when guys were coming down, guys were going up. There were some collisions that time too, but Vern went as old school as you can imagine. And I still hear it from Greg too, where they would run upstairs, they would have to do squats with that person on their shoulders, and then come downstairs as well, which is insane.
Insanity.
You know, I do squats, I should say I do. I have my students do squats with the backpack version of it, not on their shoulder, but as backpack, where they're doing squats with that person on their back. So that's like anywhere from 180 to 250 pounds of a person on your back doing 100 squats, which is crazy too. But we also do wheelbarrow push-ups, where you're in the wheelbarrow position with the guy. You do, in the corner, 10 push-ups on the canvas. Then you have to do 10 push-ups on the bottom, middle, and top rope as well, and then come down and do them as well. And then you move on. So everything is about conditioning with the core product of your body. You know, doing planks for a minute. Then you're on your back for a minute doing leg raisers. 1:45, 2 minutes. You know, if you don't have the proper conditioning in wrestling, you're not going to make it. In fact, I just had some kid quit last week because he couldn't do running in place, where you put your knees up to the middle rope. He told me he couldn't do it. And this was last Thursday. I don't know when this is going to air, so that would be September 17th, Carmine. He quit right in the middle. Everybody else is stretching. He sits down. We go to the next session of running in place with the leg raisers, you know, knee raisers, and he told me he couldn't do it. And I said, get the fuck out of my ring, get the fuck out of my school. You're done. I don't want to see you again. So recently he sent me an email saying, I'd like to talk to you about it. And I never replied. He comes back to me with another email the next day. I decided not to come back to wrestling. I'm going to get a job. I'm not replying back to him either. Fuck him. If you can't do it, I try to emulate as much as Vern Gagne and Greg Gagne, used to do to those guys. And everyone knows the story how Ric Flair quit. You know the story how he quit, and Vern Gagne went and found him at a gym or a bar, slapped him in the face, get in the fucking car, you're coming back. Could you imagine if Vern didn't do that to Ric Flair? Where would Ric Flair be right now? There would be no Ric Flair. There'd be a Ric Flair, not wrestling, but the legacy of Ric Flair would not be here if Vern would not have went after him and slapped him in the face and said, get in the fucking car. You're coming back to finish up.
Right.
That's how dedicated
Thankfully,
Vern was to stick to those guys. Chris Taylor, the Olympic athlete, champion, Chris Taylor. A lot of these guys went through Vern's school to become stars. Blackjack Lanza, Baron Von Raschke, Blackjack Mulligan, Bob Remus, and we all know who he became, Sergeant Slaughter. Greg Gagne, Jim Brunzell. I mean, all these guys, Jimmy Snuka, Ricky Steamboat, all went through Vern. And now look at their status as stars who went to become professional wrestlers, all because of the legendary AWA owner and promoter, Vern Gagne.
Absolutely. And that's one thing, Frank, I have a lot of respect for you for, is your school. And you don't baby the kids. I mean, back in the day, if somebody came to be trained and, hey, if it didn't work out and they couldn't cut it, say la vie, see you later.
That's right. That's right.
You didn't baby your trainees back in the day, and I'm happy that you don't do it today. That's one thing that is definitely a detriment to the business. And you see a lot of guys that, honestly, are in it for the wrong reasons. They have the wrong attitudes, and it all stems from who broke them in and how they were broken in.
Right. And when I have a meeting with all these wannabe superstars, they email me. Everybody who's gone through my school right now has all said the same thing. This is something I can do. I've been a fan since I was 5. I can entertain. But yet, all these quitters who have come back from, it's just fucking ridiculous. But yet, I do have a lot of kids who are still with me since day one. I'm very proud of a lot of guys, Sierra, who started with me at the age of 15. Now she's 21. Her first match was against Stacy Shadows at Summerfest, where also I am an Aflac agent. And about a month before her first match, I said, hey, I think you should get the Aflac accident benefit just in case. So I signed up her mom, and dad. And during her first match at Summerfest, she broke her nose. So she had to file a claim. But Sierra has gone through my school, and she's going to become a nurse, but she still does wrestling. So many people have come through my school and are doing well, and that's what I appreciate. And I look at it this way too, Carm, and the same thing with Vern. Vern had that school, and now they probably wouldn't have known each other to become friends if they all wouldn't have gone through Vern's school. Everybody who's gone through my school wouldn't know each other, and now they're all friends one way or another as well, too, And that makes me feel good. When I die, not if, but when I die, I hope their legacy all continues through as well. And they're all grateful that... Hold on a second.
It's all right, Frank.
Yeah, I'm getting a little emotional. But
I know. It's all right.
No, I don't care if it's true anyways, because I love what I do, and I love the kids who have gone through my school. And whether they shit on me, hate me, or love me, or like me, whatever it is, I just hope that they can respect the fact that I helped them get to where they are right now.
Well, Frank, I've known you for over 30 years, and I know that your heart's in the right place, and I know that you love the wrestling business, and I know that you love your trainees and your wrestlers, and everything you do is for the betterment of the business, which I can't say for every wrestling promoter in the country. But everything that you do, Frank, is for the betterment of the business, for the betterment of these wrestlers, to pave a path for them for the future so they can go on to bigger and better things. Your contribution to the business, I mean, is a great one. And, you know, you're an unsung hero as far as I'm concerned. You've been promoting now. I mean, if you include the years with me, you've been promoting there for, what, 25 years? Almost. I mean, it's been a long time.
This coming January will be 17 years just alone for Brew City Wrestling.
Wow. Congratulations, Frank. Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, with my company, and, you know, I'm not looking for any sympathy on everything. I know there's people out there who shit on me and blah, blah, blah. Even some of the vets who work for me right now shit on me. I don't give a flying fuck. I really don't. And they all know my saying, too. In fact, somebody gave me a shirt. I don't give a fuck. And I really don't. You know, if they want to shit on me and whatever, I don't give a fuck. If they want to, you know, thank me for what I've done, thank you very much. For everybody and all the fans who have come to my shows in the past and who presently come to my shows. If it's not for the fans, there'd be no professional wrestling at all. Whether it's Brew City Wrestling or any other WWE, AWA, without this type of entertainment, there would be nothing. And also, I'd like to thank all of my sponsors who sponsor Brew City Wrestling. There'd be no Brew City Wrestling without the fans or my sponsors. And you know that too, Carmine, when you and I were doing Mid-American. If it wasn't for the sponsors, we'd have no shows.
Absolutely not.
There'd be nothing.
No.
Because these days, you can't make paydays off of the gate. There's companies who charge $10 and only draw 50 or 60 people. You know, one kid who I will give praise to that I helped bring into the business is Dysfunction. He's got a great little thing going on with ICW, Insane Championship Wrestling here in Milwaukee. One part of it is hardcore, and he knows my feelings on that. I just wish he wouldn't do it because I love the kid like a son. And right now he's got a great thing going on in West Dallas where he's drawing over 100 people. And I'm happy for Curt. He's got a great thing. And a lot of my young kids work for him too. And they're getting starts out of that as well. The more kids that come out of my school, the Thumper's Den Wrestling Academy, are going to get more work from Curt and other companies throughout the Midwest. And that's what I want them to do, branch out. That's their job. Send out their resumes to promoters who are running right now amid the COVID-19 to get your name out there. My new website is going to launch this week where Ross Fritschka, who is my sound guy with his company, he does great work. He's going to be launching that new website where all the kids are going to have all their links on the page as well, too, on the website to get their name out there. So that's one thing, too, to get their name out there to do all that. And they're all linked with him as well. So ProGo Productions, LLC. ProGo Productions. He does TV, he does radio, billboards, newspaper. We're going to be doing podcasts as well on ProGo Productions, LLC as well, too, starting up. So getting out the Brew City Wrestling name for all of these kids who come through my school is a plus. I'm sorry, Carmine, but go ahead. Back to AWA.
Hey, you give all of your trainees all the tools that they need to succeed. You don't try to hold them back. You instill all the knowledge that's necessary to get ahead in the business. Again, Frankie, you're an asset. You're an asset to the world of wrestling. You're an asset to the business that you love.
Thank you.
Let's talk more about the AWA for a moment. What would you say your favorite match was? TV or non-televised?
Honestly, it didn't matter to me. I had great matches with Greg Gagne, Curt Hennig. Who else in the early time? How many times did I wrestle Baron when I was Mid-American champion? You know?
Almost every time we brought the Baron in.
Every time. Kenny J. I had good matches with him. I really wish I would have wrestled George Gadaski, but God rest his soul, he passed away way before then. I never had a chance to work Wahoo. You know, I had matches with Curt, Marty, Sean in the AWA. Then I also wrestled them, too, in the WWF. Every time we went from AWA to WWF, they always requested to work the enhancement guys from AWA because they already knew who we were and how we could work. So they always went to the agents there. Here, the Midwest guys coming in, have us work them. we all had that reputation from the AWA to be good workers, to put their asses over. But Greg, Jim Brunzell, Jeff Jarrett, I worked with him. I never worked snooker in the AWA. I would say Curt and Greg Gagne would be the best AWA matches I had. House shows wise, Larry Zabisco, I had a couple good ones with him. Brian Knobs, a couple house shows with him and Sags. Oh, God. I worked Brian Knobs one time. Billy Robinson was our referee. Oh, my God. You know, watching a match in the AWA, Billy Robinson against Tito, and watching Billy stretch Tito, and watching so many times Tito give Billy the office, telling him to lighten up. It was hilarious. Watching Billy work was such a pleasure, yet intensifying because it was painful just watching it. I mean, you brought him in one time, too. He didn't work. He just did a seminar or just a guest appearance.
Yeah, we just did an appearance.
But you know, I had some very good matches early on with AWA, doing TV and non-house shows as well, too. When they were in town doing non-house shows, Greg always asked me if I wanted to work. Rule number 1, if you're not booked on a show, always have your gear with you. And there were a couple times, too. I worked Colonel De Beers in Milwaukee here because Spy Master George didn't bring his gear. I brought mine, and I worked Colonel De Beers.
Always bring your gear, no matter what.
Always
if you're going to a show and you're not booked, keep that gear in the trunk. Frank,
Always.
Let's talk about Curt Hennig. You and Curt were good friends. You guys hung out a lot. What kind of guy was he?
Yes, we did. Curt was a down-to-earth, great guy. During my younger years, I mean, when I started, he helped me out with a lot of stuff, too, with a little bit of, you know, psychology and theory. When you're a young person getting into the business, even if you're in it 5 to 7 years, there's nothing wrong with picking the brain of a vet. And that's what I tell my students, too. When you're at a show, whether it's a Bruce City Wrestling show or at another show, pick the brain of the vet that's on your show. Ask them how they do certain things. You know, maybe get their psychology and theory of a match, too. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what I used to do with Nick Bockwinkel when we talk sometimes, besides insurance. But I used to pick his brain with stuff, too. That's what I did with Greg. That's what I did with Curt as well, too. Wahoo McDaniel and I had a couple stories as well. There's nothing wrong with picking the brain of a vet. Everyone should be doing it. And, you know, we mentioned it, too. Always bring your gear with you when you go to a show. And make sure it's washed. Jesus Christ.
I remember standing in the back at one show we had Nick Bockwinkel at, and he was watching your match. He turned to me, he goes, Carmine, my boy, you know what? Every match should have a 5-bump minimum. He was watching your match.
Yeah, because I didn't bump a lot. It's like when you throw the first punch in a match, the first kick in a match, the first bump. It should mean something in that match.
Yes.
That's why if you take 5 or less bumps, even now, it should mean something. But now, you know, even when Shawn Michaels was working, who? No, just kidding. When you gave a super kick, that was the finish of the match. Now you got them fucking kids, them 2 brothers, 20 super kicks during the match. That don't mean shit. When I have my kids, then they sign up to become a student at my school. I tell them right now, you're not going to learn a fucking thing that's on TV these days. Go back, if you have the network or YouTube, watch wrestling from the 80s and 90s. You're going to learn from psychology and theory then. You're not going to learn a fucking thing that's on TV. Not one thing. And it's true.
Absolutely.
I'm going to teach you how to do a headlock takeover or an arm drag, how to lock up, how to hit the ropes, how to hit a turnbuckle. We're going to teach you all the basics right away. You're not going to learn how to take a bump out of 20 consecutive super kicks. The pile driver used to mean something back in the days. Now it's used as a false finish. Stupid. That should be a finish of the match. A tombstone pile driver should be the finish, not a false finish. The bionic elbow, Dusty with a bionic elbow and then an elbow drop, should be a finish. Abby, when he did the fuck you elbow drop, it was the finish. Now, it's a false finish. It's fucking stupid.
Well, it's got to be a finish. When Abby gave you that elbow drop, it had to be the finish because you couldn't breathe.
Because it killed you.
You couldn't kick out. It killed you.
Well, Carm, let's you and I go back to the rat days when that one girl shit in the fucking tub.
Oh, my God, no. You turned the hot water on her.
That bitch was so fucking stupid because she was so drunk. I put her in the bathtub, and I put the hot water on her, and she shit in the bathtub. It was great.
She was screaming. I go, Frank, you didn't turn the hot water on her, did you?
Who, me? Turn hot water on her? I plead the 5th bottle of Jack Daniels. And then the best thing is we made her walk home. I don't give a fuck. If you're a stupid fucking rat, you're a stupid fucking rat. You're going to get treated like a stupid fucking rat.
Oh, my God. Thank God we're not going to air that, Frank. Thank God.
What the?
You don't give a fuck.
I don't give a fuck. I bet I've said fuck more times than Rip Rogers does on his. You know why? Because I don't give a fuck.
That's going to be the title of this episode, Frankie DeFalco. I don't give a fuck. Right there, that's it.
There you go. I'm
right.
sure when people listen to this, they're going to fall asleep in the first 2 minutes.
All right, so, Frankie, since we're on the topic of people just being absolutely fizzuckin' rezuthless to Rizats, you got to tell us some stories about Marty Jannetty in Vegas. There's got to be something there, all right? If he's willing to admit to murder on Facebook, there's got to be some wild stories from Marty in Vegas.
Well, Izal Tizal Yizu Viazis, Viazat, Miazar Tizi, Izan Shizan, Weezer, Rizuf Liazes, Izan Vizi, Riazats, Izin Liazas, Viazeg Iazis, Izor, Izani Weezer, Viaze, Riazant. I'm going to do this whole story in Carney. How about that?
We lost half the audience there. They're going, what the fuck are they talking about?
The fans are smart. They'll figure it out. But anyways, Marty and Sean, all those guys, Snuka, all of them, they didn't have any sympathy on the rats back then. None. Because they were pretty boys. They knew who they were. They made them, buy them the drinks. They chauffeured them from point A to point B. When they took a shit, they had blowjobs while they took a shit. They didn't care. Jesus Christ. I mean, threesomes, foursomes at the same time in each bedroom. My God. It was, if you were a rat back in those days, or if you were a mom and daughter team, you were stuck with Marty and Sean. There was no sympathy whatsoever. And if you were a rat in the Midwest and they were like in Wisconsin or Illinois or Minnesota, they had those rats drive them from town to town. They didn't care. There was no sympathy. If you were a rat back then, you paid the consequences. It was that damn simple. That Biazam Cezam Pizzle. Izif Uzor Weezer is a Riazat, Biazak Viazan, Izit Weezas Uzor Izon Fiazalt, Viazin Chizer, because Viazos Gizerls, Kiazad, Miazo Rizi Spiazak, Fiazor Viazim Cezalf. It's Viazat Cezam Pizzle. Boom!
We're going to have a Carney-only episode where we're just going to do the entire show in Carney. It'll mostly be the boys that pick up on it, and they'll really fucking enjoy the show because everybody else will be going, the fuck is
whoever
this
can
boy?
identify what I just said, they can get 2 free tickets to the next Brew City Wrestling Show, October 10th, at the Elks Lodge in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Otherwise, you can get tickets on BrewCityWrestling1.com, or you can find me on Facebook, which I'm sure I'm going to piss off a lot of people in this episode. You can find me on Facebook, too, because I don't give a fuck. Wait till I write my book, Carmine.
Hey, only 20% of the guys in the business maybe might understand what you were saying. Maybe. You know, the young guys today don't see any value in learning Carney whatsoever.
Well, my school, I teach that to them when we're on the road, and there's like one day out of a week where we do promos and we do Carney. Because there's some companies out there, your buddy Tony Capone, if he does his TV, I'm sure they're going to have to get taught how to do promos. So that's what we do once a week as well, too, is how to do a correct promo. It's spontaneous. I never tell them what day we're doing promos. I teach them Carney as well, too, because that's what Tom Stone did to me. First time he taught me Carney is say Burger King and Carney, and it's Biazerger Kiazing. That's how I got taught Carney, by saying Burger King. And I teach them the hard stuff in the beginning. You got to say Mississippi. But the thing is, too, is that I have some of my vets who've been along with me for, 3 years. I've had my Thumper Stand Wrestling Academy coming on 5 years. Some have stayed, some have gone, and some is I really don't give a fuck anymore. But they know Carney. They know the old school and the new school on how to say Carney, and we teach that to them. If you don't know Carney and you're in the business, you're fucked, basically. We have a lot of carnival shows. We only had one this year, but during the summer, we have a lot of fairs and festivals, and we walk through the Midway, and we're talking carny, and then watching the carnies watch us talk carny, it's hilarious. And that's the other thing, too, is I teach the students is that wrestling started as a carnival event. And we are carnies when you think about it. Silas Young says, I'm the best carny promoter out there. Is that an insult? Yeah. Is that an insult? No, because I won't take it as one, because professional wrestling started out as being a carnival event. So
James, Frankie and I used to go to Wisconsin State Fair and talk to the old carnies in Kearney. Those carnies used to be shocked. Like, who the hell are you guys? You know, but unfortunately in the business, Frank, I'm going to say 80% of the guys do not spiazi kiazarni, and they really don't have any desire to. They find it to be a part of the old school that doesn't pertain to them today. Personally, to me, I think it's a shame. I think it's a real shame. I mean, for one thing, from a practical standpoint, we use carny in everyday situations. If we were out at a restaurant and we wanted to say something about the waitress, let's say, or something of that nature, we would say it in carny. So I don't understand. There's a lot of things about the business nowadays that have changed. Honestly, I don't see things change for the better. I love the business the way it used to be,
right.
With everybody in it that is in it for the same reason. Like you, Frankie, all of these years, you're still in the business, you're passing on knowledge, you're passing on the business, you're doing it your way that you believe it should be done, and in my opinion, it is the way that it should be done. And all these young guys are benefiting from it, unlike they could do anywhere else, and that's the truth. There are a few great trainers out there. Rip Rogers is one of them. He definitely instills the love of the business and, you know, teaches them all of the old school things. But then, of course, he also is able to make that bridge into the new school, which definitely needs to be done. The style of wrestling had to evolve to a certain extent. But when you get to the point that you're making fun of the business, it defeats the purpose. And if there's too much ha-ha stuff on a show, it just distracts from other parts of the show that you're trying to get over in a serious way.
Correct.
The AWA and promotions like the AWA, the NWA, all the promotions from the 70s, the 80s, the one goal of the wrestlers was to evoke emotions from the fans during their match. That's a very old school approach, as opposed to today, where it's about a whole bunch of high spots. It's like an episode of America's Got Talent, and it's just moves without much meaning. And I'm happy to hear that you're still getting it done there in Milwaukee, Frank.
Right. That's why I don't watch AEW. I watch, I DVR it just to see what's going on there. And they had, the opening match was an 8-man tag, and it was all spots. All fucking spots. How can a fan keep up with that shit? There was not one hold it all done. Not a headlock takeover. You know, it was all spots. And it's fucking ridiculous watching that company work. They got Chris Jericho in there, who's a great mind, but yet they always insist on doing spots. It's a spot company, spot fest. You got the two brothers in there, whatever their names are, 20 million super kicks. It's ridiculous. Go to the basics of a match. The fans would appreciate it so much more if they went to having old school wrestling. They have old school talent in there, don't get me wrong, with Jericho and everything else, but they just don't have the concept. And especially with Cody, knowing that his father, Dusty Rhodes, had the old school concept of things, who had a great mind. Don't get me wrong, Cody and Dustin have great minds, but they should incorporate more old school wrestling into those matches, not spot fest every match.
Well, it's kind of tough, I guess, for them to go in reverse now. Once they've given them this style, where do you go from here, you know?
Sure.
It's kind of tough to rewind the tape, so to speak, and revert back to an old school style. You still have to entertain the people, and you have to do what you have to do to entertain a certain audience. I know that when you do fair shows, tell the folks about the one shtick that you do with the Battle Royal.
At fair shows, what I do is, like the main event, if the babyface is going over and during the comeback, I will have a couple heels come out and start beating down the babyface, and then I send out the whole locker room, and it goes into a battle royal. So then what I do is I come out on the microphone, and I yell, "Freeze!" And everybody stops what they're doing. And then I say, "How dare you guys come out and jump la 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 in the middle of a match when it was so going good? You know what? There's only one thing we can do at this point. Who wants to see a battle royal? Yay! I can't hear you. Who wants to see a battle royal? Yay! Well, the winner of this battle royal will become the Shawano County Fair champion, or Sheboygan, or Portage County Fair champion, and I have a belt made with the state of Wisconsin, and it says Wisconsin Fair and Festival Heavyweight Champion on it. Ring the bell, and then they go at it, and I usually put over a baby face that the people like during the show. Or it might be the baby face who got screwed over during the main event, and then after the match, they get that belt, and then I invite all the kids from the show to come in the ring, and they celebrate with the baby face. And that makes it look good to the people who run the fair and the festival that I involve all those kids, and that has automatically, it comes back for next year.
There's a place and time for everything. Exactly. There's a place and time for everything, and it works at the county fairs. It definitely does work.
Absolutely. The fair people love that I involve the kids, and then I also have the fair owner be a manager or ring announcer too. And that guarantees me to come back next year, too, because I always talk to them during the show. Hey, how do you like it? Oh, they love it. Da-da. And then we sign the contract during the show, right away for next year. I've averaged close to 50 to 60 shows now for the last 10 years, including Summerfest, State Fair, and a bunch of other fairs and festivals in between that we always return engagements to every year. But it's always that battle royal at the end of the show. Now, other promoters are probably going to hear this and steal my shit, but I don't care, because I don't give a fuck. If it helps them, let them.
They can all learn from you.
Yeah, that's what I do. No, they'll learn, but that's what I do at every fair and festival is the battle royal. And the people love it.
It's definitely a great idea that you don't see lots of people doing, but they probably will now. But hey, it's just a testament that it was your idea first, you did it better, and you'll probably still continue to do it better than anybody else can. So where can people find your Bruce City Wrestling? Where can they find you on Facebook, things like that? Plug all your stuff.
The website is BruceCityWrestling1.com, the number 1.com. Facebook, you can find me at Frankie DeFalco. On Twitter, it's at BCW1. I am also on Snapchat for Bruce City Wrestling, and I have a Bruce City Wrestling fan page on Facebook as well.
Those will be great places to check you out.
James, but you know what? I don't give a fuck. But anyways, go ahead.
That's going to be the episode title. You're going to find it. Frankie DeFalco does not give a fuck. That's how you're going to be able to find that.
That's a good thing. Okay, anyways, go ahead.
You've been all over. You've been through the AWA, the WWF.
There was also that one time, too, where it happened to me doing WWF TV. They brought in this one kid from Madison, big, strong, musclehead kid. Forgot his name. He was trained by Gino Brito up in Montreal. He had his trout, and he worked me, and he literally beat the shit out of me. The only thing he protected me on was his tombstone pile driver. When I got back, I was the first one to come back, and Outback Jack and a few of the boys asked me if I was okay. I said, honestly, no, I'm hurting right now. The minute that guy came back, all those vets, Jake Roberts, Outback Jack, Hercules, DiBiase, they all took him to another room, and they sat him down, and they gave him the biggest tongue lashing that he deserved. Vince didn't hire him. The next night, he ended up working Outback Jack in a TV match, dark match or whatever, and Jack beat the fuck out of him for what he did to me the night before. And I appreciated that. I forgot his name. He ended up doing an Indian gimmick with Wahoo in the AWA. And he remembered who he was, and he apologized for what he did to me. Like a year later, that happened. But he remembered who I was, and I definitely remember who he was because I saw him. Steve Strong. That's who it was. Steve Strong was
Steve Strong from Canada.
Yeah, that was him.
The big muscle guy from Canada.
Big fucking no clue musclehead, meathead motherfucker. Jack beat the shit out of him, but he remembered me what he did a year later. And he sent me down and he apologized that it was wrong. He ended up working for a little bit as an indie with Wahoo. He didn't last long in the AWA either because of his attitude and his mentality of working didn't work well in the AWA in Vern Gagne's style. He didn't mess well with what Wahoo did either because he was just too big and didn't give a fuck type attitude. How can you not learn from Wahoo McDaniel? Is just ignorant on his part as well. But is what it is.
Should I bring up you ribbon Pat Patterson? When we were at the plaza in the casino.
Yeah. So we're doing TV for AWA at the Milwaukee Auditorium, and Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson were there. And all of a sudden, Brian Knobs comes out of the shower naked with peanut butter on his ass. And he turns around and goes, has anybody seen Pat Patterson? And we all just went, what the fuck did he just do? It was crazy. We couldn't believe that he fucking did that shit.
Who would stick the toothbrush in their ass?
Yeah, that was him too. He comes out of the bathroom, he goes, has anybody seen my toothbrush? And then he's asking all the boys. He's got the toothbrush in his ass, too.
Sticking out of his ass.
What an asshole. Knobs is such an asshole. And then later on, when he became friends with Hulk Hogan, he thought his shit did not stink. I'm just like, fuck this. I don't need this guy here anymore.
No, Knobs is not one of my favorite people either. But we'll talk about that at a later time.
Yes.
Paisan, thanks a lot, my brother, for being on the podcast. Means a lot to me having you on. We have been lifelong friends. For God's sake, you stood at my wedding. I stood up at your wedding. We go way back. We were roommates many times during the years. Don't get to see you as often as I'd like to, being that, now I'm in Oklahoma. But I try to get back a couple times a year. And hopefully after this COVID thing wraps up, I'll be coming back to see everybody. I consider Milwaukee my home. Although I grew up in New Jersey, Milwaukee will always be my home, and that's where all my great friends are and where I've had the best time of my life. Yeah. Frankie, don't worry about those haters, man. Haters will hate. You keep doing what you do, Frank. Like I said before, you're a great asset to this business. Keep doing what you do, Paisan. Without you and people like you, the business, our business, the business as we know it, will be lost forever. So keep on keeping on, Frank.
I appreciate you, brother. Love you very much. James, it's been a pleasure. And just remember, guys, I don't give a fuck.
And just like that, Frankie DeFalco has become not only my favorite guest we've interviewed on this podcast, but one of my favorite people in general. It's been a blast talking to you, Frankie. I know we're going to have you back on the podcast soon because this right here, this is good shit. I think everybody's going to love it. And thank you again for coming on. And one more time, Bruce City Wrestling, plug that shit.
www.brucecitywrestling1.com is the website. You can find me, Frankie DeFalco, on Facebook. Bruce City Wrestling on Facebook, at BCW1 on Twitter, and Bruce City Wrestling on Instagram.
Thank you so much for coming on. We hope to have you back very soon. Be sure and check out his stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Frankie DeFalco.
And I don't give a fuck.
A huge thank you to Frankie the Thumper DeFalco. It was a great time talking to him. Oh my god, my sides hurt. I've laughed so hard in the past 2 hours. Carmine.
Well, if that doesn't get us an explicit rating, I don't think anything will. You know, when you get two Dagos together, well, we just naturally talk over each other anyway. So you can't blame me this week, folks. Frankie and I have been such great friends for so many years. Hell, I named my cat after him. I named my cat Thumper. We have been very, very close friends through the years, and it was great having him on. And how about those stories about the AWA? I mean, hey, those are some untold stories of the AWA. Can't deny that.
In a sort of roundabout way, we did achieve our goal of telling some untold stories of the AWA, and no better storyteller to tell them than Frankie DeFalco. I have no doubt that folks are going to want to hear more Frankie DeFalco on the show, whether you guys are just chatting it up or telling some stories from your time in Milwaukee with Mid-American Wrestling. I am positive that people want to hear more Frankie DeFalco after that, and if you don't have a soul. You don't have a soul if you don't like Frankie the Thumper DeFalco.
Yuzu Diazon, he is have a seasol. You see, kids, you gotta brush up on your carny if you're gonna be one of our listeners here on Contrary to Popular Wrestling.
Not too many wrestling podcasts out there speaking carny, but ladies and gentlemen, we want to remind you to give us a like on Facebook to stay up to date with all the new things coming out on the show. That's where you'll find out what we're doing next and how you can listen to us. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and see the videos of our shows. We put together great slideshows to go with each episode. Subscribe to us there and give us a thumbs up on the videos you watch. And then if you want to let us know your thoughts on the show, if you have guest suggestions, comments, concerns, or corrections, send them to our email at ContraryPod, ContraryPod @gmail.com. ContraryPod@gmail.com. And Carmine, with that being said, we'll sizzy yizu nizext wizik on Kizontrary to Pizza Pulitzer Rizesling.
That wasn't too bad, James. That wasn't too bad.